Hi, friends. I have a twofer. Chad came up with some questions last week, and I don't have much time, so I wrote it out. But let me get this settled a little bit. So I decided to do the answers to two questions because I thought they kind of dovetailed nicely. I'm sorry, this is really wonky. Okay. So it's the answers to number 21 and 22. In what or in whom do I have faith? And secondly, talk about a time when you were in over your head. So my two kind of go hand in hand. I'll tell you what I don't have faith in. This fallen planet. Ask my kids, they'll joke about how I blame an entire decade for messing me up. Yes, the 70s were not good to me, and I was very little, very impressionable. I could put half of the 80s in there too, actually. Fast forward to where I'm emerging from my shell in maybe high school, college, choosing what my adulthood will look like, choosing poorly, I should add, on my own. I eventually found myself in over my head, and there's a name for it now, predatory lending. But we had no idea back then what that really looked like. They get you in college. Build your credit, they said. It'll be fun, they said, right? As if I hadn't been grabbed and teased enough growing up. I now had a financial predator following me around. Every 2 weeks or so, I would call one to pay the other or switch to a new lower interest rate. It never ends. Credit. An aside, we knew a man, again from the 70s, maybe early 80s, who took his own life and decided it must have been, in the church not knowing what the deal was, like why. That's the first question whenever anyone takes their life is, what happened? Why? And the best explanation was that he had gone through bankruptcy recently. I thought back then how very sad it was to change the trajectory of your entire, family, wife and kids. His kids were my age at the time, over money, right? I mean, it sounds not necessary until it happened to me. It was daunting, the mound of debt. Then one of the banks decided to sue. Now I was in over my head. All of my debt was what they called consumer debt. There was no yacht, no fancy car, no house, giant house. I had been using credit to make ends meet, medical bills, groceries, rent, and gas. So there's a different kind of bankruptcy for that. That's for another day. Anyway, I took that part out because it doesn't have anything to do with the story. So on this day, the day I was sitting down to make a list of everything I own in order to figure out how to meet my obligations, I felt the full weight of it. My failure. I had failed. That was it. There was nothing left to give, nothing left of me inside, or so I felt. And I finally knew a little bit of what that man might have been going through at church some 30 years earlier. There was an overwhelming urge that night to stand up from the table, walk over to the medicine cabinet, and take enough baby aspirin to bleed to death internally. It's a blood thinner. I figured, take a whole bunch of blood thinner and you will slip into eternity. And it sounded like a relief to me. Just end it all quietly with zero consideration for my husband and my kids. I was scared. No, just stand up and walk in there. No, just call out to him. And these two thoughts were raging in my head until I decided I had to say it. I whispered. It's all I could do to get it out. Help me. And without delay, like immediately, I whispered, help me. And my son ran around the corner to tell me something cool, which completely snapped me out of it. I had been sitting there for at least 45 minutes, undisturbed in my darkness, and at a single whisper, the Lord sent my boy in the nick of time. That, friends, is in whom I have faith. There is nothing so tempting that there will not be made a way of escape if you don't tune him out. I gasped for air, found a lawyer somehow, and made it to the hearing. And here we have a beautiful little picture of redemption. If you've ever been through this particular experience, I walked into the courtroom and sat with the others who would be approaching the bench one at a time to see about having their debt relieved. There was a table with 3 chairs and 3 signs designating who would sit in which chair. There was the trustee, the debtor, and the counsel. After the instructions were given to the whole court, I was called up first. I took my place as the debtor, and my lawyer took her place as counsel. The trustee, dressed like a judge, sat across the table from us, and although I was answering yes and no to the questions, it was the counsel who made it possible for me to approach the bench in the first place. She had carefully gone over my situation with me in her office. For a couple of months, we combed through the mound of paperwork that would eventually make its way to the desk of the trustee that day. And with one word, one look into my eyes, all was forgiven. Now, there were debts I chose to take care of over time, like the boys' school and the mortgage and the car. I mean, those things were, legitimate, but the credit cards, they had already made off of me more than I owed, like tenfold. So at this point, it was just gravy. So the part that was forgiven was not, anyway, there's different ways to look at it, but it was overwhelming to me. So you can understand with that the analogy only goes so far, because with spiritual redemption, there are no debts left to carry yourself. There is no way to make things right with a righteous God. You can't say, oh, well, I'll take care of this part, and Jesus, I'm going to trust you for my salvation. But I can definitely cover this over here. It's zero. He covers everything, and you just accept that free gift. He provided the only way, his son, Jesus, to stand in for us at judgment time. His sacrifice wiped away our debt, and his resurrection conquered death, so we can stand at the Father's throne completely clean, white as snow. I have faith in my Creator, my Sustainer, and my Counsel, Jesus Christ. So there you have it. The time when I was in over my head almost took my own life. And by the grace of God, he rescued me, and that is in whom I have faith. Have a good evening.